My name's Lucinda, and I have a wonderful job. I get to talk to people about all of this stuff all day long, which I really enjoy. There's lots of things people can do in their homes, and even if you're a renter, that is no reason why you can't. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is what the rental standards are, but also what that turns into in practice in things you can do. So let me just go this slide. We're going to look at rental standards in relation to two things. One is the building that's around you, and we talk about that in terms of building thermal efficiency, which just means how well your building can manage heat transfer in and out, or, stopping it. And we're also going to look at appliances and efficiency. And then we've got a few general resources at the end. Whenever I talk about having a comfortable and efficient home, to me the focuses are on three areas. Part of it is the building shell and how well it keeps the heat out in summer and how well it keeps it in winter. Then there's the appliances and how efficiently they do what you want them to do. For example, if you've got a heater, how efficiently does it turn the fuel into heat? And then there's something that applies to both of them, which is how you use your home and your appliances. And this might be a place that you focus on as a renter because you have limited ability to do things, that you can do things to your building shell and you can choose the most efficient appliances, but how you use the things around you is likely to be something that you can do without any permission. So it's handy to know how to use things. With the building shell, we'll start by talking about all of the things you can do here and rental standards in relation to. The cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. And that really applies to your building shell because the things you do there will reduce the amount of energy you need to use to be comfortable in the first place. And that's why it's a great place to start if you can. Heat moves in and out of our homes in various ways, mainly by radiation, conduction and convection. You don't need to remember those terms, but just to remember that what we're doing with building shell upgrades is managing whether that heat's coming in or being lost and making it work to our best advantage. For me, the place to start is with zoning. And it's about thinking of your house in terms of zones. It doesn't matter what the house is. If you can manage to heat or cool smaller areas of it, that will really have a positive impact on your energy bills and your costs. So it's about trying to close doors if you can. If you can't, maybe working out if you can hang a curtain or something over an unused area. Just referring to this picture, say if you only use the master bedroom and the main living space, but you don't use the bedrooms or the in-law suite, just being able to separate them off and not heat and cool them is really a good thing. It's tricky if you have a ducted heating system, but if you don't, this is the place to start pretty much. There are no standards that relate to zoning, but you can just add some yourself as long as it's removable. And I'll show a couple of pictures of removable options. The left one is someone who has discovered that all of the warm air downstairs is heading upstairs and they're having trouble staying warm downstairs. So they've got curtains from the op shop and just stuck them to the roof with some Velcro tape and used bulldog clips to connect them over that stairwell. I know it's not incredibly pretty, but it could really reduce the amount of space that your heating's trying to heat, and also it will keep the heat downstairs. The other one on the right is a telescopic pole that you can get from any hardware store, and you just put it at the top of the empty space, like across a doorway, and hang a curtain off it. You can take it off completely after you've gone, so the landlord doesn't need to even know that it was there. Then if we think about draft proofing, this is one that people generally are aware of. But you may not be aware that up to 25% of heat loss in winter can be through drafts, which is pretty massive. What you're wanting to do is physically block gaps in your home, and that gives you a fair range of ways you can do it. And the benefit of draft proofing is that you're not losing all that air and having to reheat it. They reckon the average Victorian house, if you add up all the gaps and cracks that are around the house, is the equivalent of having a metre square window open all the time. So even though the gaps themselves seem small, the combined effect is really significant. And imagine you're heating, but you've got the equivalent of a window open, you're just losing that heat, reheating it, losing it again, reheating it. It's really expensive. Luckily, there are some standards with draft proofing. The house is supposed to be weatherproof and have no major drafts, but that's a little bit vague, probably. I think a lot of things to do with rentals. A good rental provider will do these to a better degree and have more respect for the people living in the house. So some of it might be interpreted differently by a landlord that doesn't care so much. But anyway, it should be weatherproof. If you want to, you can use, well, without any permission, you can use things that you can take away, like door snakes, or there's little rolls with a material joining them in the middle that go under the door. That's another really good removable draft seal. But you can also do a number of things with permission from the rental provider. And the main thing about this is that these are things you can do. You have to ask for permission, but they have to have a very good reason not to give you permission. So although you have to ask permission, they pretty much can't say no. And that's things like installing weather sealing strips to doors and windows, and some caulking. For example, if you notice that there are gaps around windows or doors or skirting boards, you are allowed to fill them up with a caulking gun if they're drafty. So that's good that you can do that stuff. There is one condition, and that's that there must not be an open flued gas heater in the room, which the reason for that is just purely health. But if you don't have that, you can go ahead and caulk and weather seal. The proposed new regulations are much better. They are that before you even move in, that home should be draft sealed. The doors and windows, caulking, all of those gaps in the house. So that is going to be much better because it doesn't leave it to the tenant to have to sort that out. I should just explain that with the proposed new regulations, they've already reached a point where everyone's given their feedback about them, and now they're in that final stage where they're deciding to make them law, and once they are, then they'll be brought in 1 year from that time. So we're not entirely sure when that will happen, but it should happen in the next couple of months because they've already been in that process for a couple of months. So if you just think probably a year from now is when a lot of these things will come in. This is purely to explain that open flued gas space heater issue. It actually also applies to wood space heaters, but I'm not sure if that is in the rental code. They only mention the gas. Pretty much, there's just risks that heater might be putting out stuff into the air that you don't want to be breathing in, and it can give you all sorts of side effects. So that's why we don't draft proof in those areas. It's really a good driver, I think, for rental providers to not have those things because they should be looking after your health. They do need to service appliances every couple of years, so at least they are in reasonable condition. If you need to find drafts in your home, sorry, I'm just trying to move this out of my way there. If you're trying to find drafts in your home, I think that the simple ways are the easiest, which is just feeling them. You can often, if it's a windy day, just feeling or maybe seeing the curtains flapping from a draft, or you can see drafts. Anywhere that you can see light, that means there's going to be airflow. Or you can use a candle or an incense stick, and especially on a cold, windy day, walk around the house past all sorts of features, windows, doors, even power points can be drafty, strangely. It just depends how plumbing has been put in or electrical appliances. All of these areas, you might be able to find drafts, and that's a good way to find them. I do want to mention one other thing, though, is that if you have a really drafty house and you seal a whole lot of gaps, you do have to just be careful that you're not ending up with more water vapor or condensation in the house than you did before because you've sealed the draft. If you want to learn more about that, there's a few, just Google condensation and draft sealing and you'll find some really good guides. With insulation in houses, what you're trying to do, what insulation does is it traps air pockets in the insulation material, and then having that between you and the outside reduces the ability of heat to move through that. So it stops it coming indoors. If it's hot, if it's summer, it will stop that flowing through from the air, the ceiling cavity into the house. If it's winter, the heat that you've created will rise to the ceiling and the insulation will prevent it from flowing out through the ceiling. The R value that you might hear about just refers to the resistance to heat flow. So the higher the R value, the better. Ceiling insulation is definitely the most important to have of all, mainly because in summer the sun's beating down on your ceiling and in winter the heat's rising. So it's just got the biggest capacity for losing or gaining heat. There aren't any rental standards relating to insulation. The only thing you can really do is lay rugs on the floor, which is a DIY removable version of underfloor insulation. It's unfortunate that there aren't any other standards, but that is going to be rectified with the new regulations. I'll just mention, though, there's a sort of a catch-all phrase in the rental standards that says you can do other things that are needed to make sure the renter is not too hot or too cold and to reduce the energy or water bills. And I think that depending on your rental provider, you could argue that lack of insulation is creating a situation that's too hot or too cold and unusually high energy bills. So I think you could argue it, but it would probably be a case-by-case basis whether you could actually come to an agreement. The new regulations are good because they say if no ceiling insulation exists, then R5 has to be installed in a new rental place before you move in, which is good. I know I knew someone who recently was living in a rental that had no ceiling insulation and they had to move out because it was just so uncomfortable. So this is at least something that's going to prevent that worst case scenario of having no ceiling insulation. With windows, what you want really with a window treatment is to reduce air flowing across the window because it's the air moving that loses heat or gains heat by touching that window. There are standards related to window treatments, which is that any rooms that will be used as bedrooms or living areas have to have curtains or blinds. You can, without permission, replace them with better ones. So that's going to be a really good opportunity for a lot of people to improve the thermal efficiency of their house. And the proposed new regulations, there aren't any in this category, but consider that according to Sustainability Victoria, installing thick, close-fitting drapes with a boxed pelmet is a similar insulating effect to double glazing when the curtains are closed. So you can get a really good thermal protection from good, heavy, lined curtains and a pelmet. This is what you'd be looking for to improve the thermal protection of your window coverings. Is on the left, you'll see just the typical lined heavy curtain. The next picture over shows what we call an invisible pelmet on the top. It's probably going to be hard to install a box pelmet if you're a renter because they're expensive and you'd have to have permission. But an invisible pelmet you could make from cut up core flute or even cardboard, or I've heard of people getting a thick scarf and just running it across the top of the curtain to create a pelmet. The third picture over shows a honeycomb blind that's installed inside the deep rebate of the window, and that's another fantastic option because it's stopping airflow. And the final picture on the right shows a curtain hanging off a ceiling track where the ceiling acts as the pelmet. All of these would be a good option if you were trying to reduce the heat flow through your windows. With glazing, what you want to do is create an air gap between two panels, and that also slows down the movement of heat into and out of your home. There aren't any standards with window glazing in the rental standards. However, there's a bunch of things you're allowed to do without permission, such as, well, anything that is removable, basically, including bubble wrap or removable panels or film that goes on the glass that has to be able to be removed. And another option is clear comfort. I'm going to show you a photo of that in a minute, but you can adhere it to the window frame with a temporary tape. The only thing is that temporary tape should detach in 6 to 12 months, but if by any chance it did do any damage to the paintwork, you'd have to, rectify that and before you left the house, otherwise you'd potentially lose some bonds. So it's something to keep in mind. There's no regulations coming up for window glazing. These are the kinds of things you can do. The bubble wrap is the top right-hand picture. The clear comfort is the guy with the hairdryer. So you put double-sided tape on a window frame and get this cellulose membrane that goes over it. Actually, it might not be cellulose, but it's a really thin plastic that looks like cellophane or glad wrap cross between. You stick it to the window at the window frame and you shrink it with a hairdryer, and it introduces an air gap between the original glass and the membrane, and that gives you a benefit. And the third option is removable panels. That's the picture at the left. It's probably not even that obvious they're in those windows, but they're removable panels made with fly screen frames and a clear plastic tablecloth and put into the window, which is a really effective and low cost and removable way to improve your glazing. External shading, again, there's no current standards with that, but there are things you can do that will prevent summer sun mainly from coming inside. And that would be attaching some kind of removable physical shade over the windows. I'll show you a couple of photos of what I mean. The top left photo is somebody's actually created those window shades out of a sheet, and that's removable. They can take it down and it didn't cost them anything. The guy in the middle, again, is just getting a sheet or a piece of shade cloth or something like that and using bulldog clips to hang it on the gutter going over the wall or the window, which is really effective. The picture at the top right is a deciduous vine, which you would have to get permission for, but it is a really beautiful and low-cost way to get nice shading over an area. And the picture at the bottom is an example of something you can do that isn't an external shade. Instead, it's a perforated foil that you stick into the windows just with Velcro dots, and it reflects summer sun out, which keeps your room cooler. So that could be a really good option as well in heat waves. With windows, there's a bunch of user behaviour. That is, in summer, if you know it's going to be hot, just putting up any kind of shading you have, pulling it down early, closing windows and curtains, and then at the end of the day, opening everything up again to let the house really cool down overnight. In winter, at night time when you go to bed, just try and get used to closing the curtains to reduce the amount of heat that's going to be lost out through those curtains. Hopefully you can wake up in the morning and some of that heat will still be inside. And the other thing is, in winter, trying to remember to open curtains to allow direct sun. If there's direct sun coming from any angle, try and let it inside, because that's going to be free heat. With the appliances, we'll talk first about active heating, which is where you've done whatever you can to your building shell to retain the heat inside, but now you need to supplement that with something active. The current rental standards are better than they used to be, and they are that from March 2023, there has to be a fixed energy efficient heater in the main living area. That can be a range of things, one of which is a air conditioner with a 2-star or above energy rating, or it can be a gas space heater with a 2-star or above rating. Or there can be a ducted system or hydronic system, but as long as it has an outlet in the main living area. The other one is that it can be a fireplace or a wood-burning stove. If you were trying to find a rental, just keep in mind that wood is really expensive to buy. So I think that, it's just worth considering that that is not a money-efficient way to create heat. The proposed new regulations are much better, which is that as soon as the current heating needs to be replaced, it has to be replaced with a 2 or more star electric heater. The reason that's good is that it is removing gas from the equation, which is expensive and not as efficient, and it's pretty much meaning that it has to be a reverse cycle air conditioner, because that's the only one that has a star rating, and these are the most efficient way to heat. So renters will be guaranteed to have basically an efficient way to heat. If you do have an air conditioner in your home already, then use it. A lot of people aren't aware that how efficient they are, but they are multiple times more efficient than any other option on the market. So if you have one, use it, not just for cooling, but for heating as well. A few ways to supplement that would be low-cost personal heating devices. They're cheap to buy, they're cheap to run, and they heat your body. So you don't need to be using all that energy to heat all the air in the room. You can heat your body directly, which is really effective. And of course, rugging up and wearing slippers helps. Then there's far infrared heaters, which could be an option for renters, partly because they're portable. You can take them with you when you go. The way they work, they're a plug-in electric heater, but they create a different kind of heat, that instead of trying to heat air, they heat whatever they are angled towards. And the best way to imagine them is, if it's a cold winter's day and you step outside under the sun, you feel warm because the sun's rays are hitting you, but the air around you is cold. That's what a far infrared heater does. If it's, say, mounted above a couch and you're sitting on the couch, you will get warm and the couch will get warm, but the air in between won't be. It can be a really good option, but mainly for straight over you or facing you or in a small space. It's not the kind of thing that would keep you warm if you're wandering around a room. Cooling and rental standards. There aren't any standards as yet, but you could see if you could install a ceiling fan. You'd have to pay for it. The proposed new regulations will be better. For some reason, this particular cooling one is delayed, and what they've said is that from 2027 October, if there's no cooling, the rental provider has to install a fixed cooling system of 3 or more stars in the main living area, which at least means you'll have somewhere to stay cool. And if there is one and it needs replacing, they also have to replace it with a similar one. Ceiling or pedestal fans are always a great idea. If they're there, use them. Buy pedestal fans if there's no ceiling fan. They can give you a 3-degree cooling effect, even though they're not cooling the air. Evaporative cooling, if your rental has an evaporative cooler, they are energy efficient to use. They're just not so good when it's hot or humid. And if you want to create a similar effect, you could try wetting a towel and hanging it over a chair and blowing a fan through it from the other side, and that will give a similar kind of effect. Reverse cycle units, I've already mentioned that they are very efficient to use. So if you have them, that should be a low-cost thing to use. And then there's a few things to do just to keep your appliances running well. The most important one is anyone with a air conditioner on the wall, a reverse cycle air conditioner, just frequently cleaning the filters, the filter pads. So that's what these things are on the right. You just flip open the front, usually, of the reverse cycle air conditioner, pull them out, wash them with warm soapy water and put them back. And that will make them work so much better. Sometimes, if you move into a rental, you might notice that they're really caked with dust because the previous person maybe didn't know they could be removed. So, yeah, that's a great one to keep an eye on. Heating and cooling by zone, of course, just reduces costs and improves your comfort because your devices aren't working so hard. Wearing suitable clothing for the season, and anything you can do to your building shell, like draft proofing or putting on really nice thick curtains, they're going to help your comfort as well. Hot water, we have there's a couple of rental standards. One is that showers have to have a WELS 3-star shower head. If they don't for any reason, you can put one in and they're free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. You probably just have to keep the original one. And the new regulations is also a water efficient shower head, but even lower flow, WELS 4-star. A good new proposal, though, is that when the hot water system needs replacing, it will be replaced with either a solar hot water system or a heat pump, which is great because that's very efficient. A couple more rebates or things that people can access. Renters can access the Victorian Energy Upgrades program. There's a bunch of things that are free installs, and as long as the rental provider agrees, and I can't see why they wouldn't, they can get them, which includes shower heads, a draft ceiling and an in-home energy monitor. And if they did get permission to install, say, an air conditioner, then they could also get rebates off that, as could anybody. Rental providers can get the same things, and rental providers can also get the Solar Vic rebate to put in a rooftop solar for the house. They, however, are not allowed to increase the rent or take bond money. They can make an agreement to share some of the costs of the loan repayments, but it's limited so that protects the rental provider. I've just got a couple more things to mention, and I won't read through these in detail. You'll get a copy of these notes so you can look back on them if you think they might apply to you. The Energy Assistance Program is for anyone who's on a concession or is just under hardship in paying bills, and they'll match you up with someone to help you make a plan, maybe get you on a payment plan or apply for rebates or concessions for you. There's also Utility Relief Grant Scheme, which can be applied to your utilities. There's rebates for electricity, gas and water, and there's also a couple of additional ones, a medical cooling concession, and if you're on life support or someone in your household is, there's another concession for that. There's a no interest loan scheme, which is for people that well, you have to qualify for it, but it means that you can get, for example, $3,000 for housing-related expenses. If something breaks, for example, a reverse cycle air conditioner, you could put in a reverse cycle air conditioner with that money. If you're on an aged care package, then you could use that money as well to improve a house because it's all related to being healthy. You can look at your energy use just to check that there's nothing unexpected happening. There's a couple of ways to do that through the distributor portal or with one of the in-home energy monitors that can be installed free. You can compare your electricity and gas rates just to make sure you're on a good plan. And checking your bill is worthwhile because every retailer must tell you if there's a plan they have that could be saving your money. So just keeping an eye on it and making sure you're always on the best one. There's great information about all sorts of things in these two publications, yourhome.gov.au and Sustainability Victoria, which is well worth looking at. And there's a whole lot of webinars through this series of Empower Your Home. This is the first one, I think. So there's a whole series more that will relate to some of the things we've mentioned here. So I really encourage everybody to attend as many of those as they can.